Introduce our first speaker of this session, Sara Laursen. Sara did her undergrad at UBC and is currently doing her Master of Science at Carleton in Christina Davies' lab. And her presentation is going to be about little brown myotis roost selection and movement patterns following an eviction. Welcome, Sara.
Sorry, can we? They can. I don't know how to actually fix that. Because they can. Right here? Better? No.
If you go to the three dots, you should have a switch.
Sorry, this one? Hi, presenter view? And which one?
Sorry, no, up there.
Yeah, okay, no.
Presenter view.
Are you seeing the presenter view on that laptop?
Right there, I think display settings. Yeah, but it didn't have the option to swap.
Okay, I can kind of wing it. It's all good. Let's go presenter view and I'll wing it. I've given this presentation about 7 times. Okay. We're just going to wing it. You got it. Yeah, I've given this presentation a few times. So, hi everyone. My name is Sara Laursen. I'm a first-year master's student at Carleton University under Dr. Christina Davie, and we've been working on this project for over a year. It's actually a different project from my thesis, and it's on behalf of the Canadian Wildlife Federation. We're looking at how little brown myotis respond to a roost disturbance. So unfortunately for bats, and as we all know, they don't really have the best PR team, especially when they're in your home. And you know, most people, when the public come into contact with bats, they are concerned about disease transmission and, you know, the restoration cost of their property if that's becoming a problem. And the public seems to always be worried about their hair. Don't know why. Little brown myotis are gregarious roosters, and they use a wide range of roost types. In attics in their homes, bat boxes, chimneys, as well as natural roost sites, caves, and trees. They can be quite problematic as guests, as we just said, and a lot of times people will choose to call pest control companies to get rid of them. We were really lucky that the homeowner of this project that we were on wanted to remove the bats as humanely as possible and decided to call in CWF, which gave us an excellent opportunity to study what their movement patterns would be after the disturbance. Additionally, we know little brown myotis are endangered under the Species at Risk Act, and in order to protect them, we need to attempt to define what their critical habitat is so that we can protect it. So part of this project was just to attempt to define, you know, what is their critical habitat. So the objectives of our study are to characterize the roosting ecology of the maternity colony of little brown myotis following a major roost disturbance or eviction, to assess the use of the artificial roosts that we placed to see if they're using them and the frequency of the uptake of these boxes, and to also look at the roosts that they are using after the eviction to see what kind of characteristics of roosts are commonly used by little brown myotis. So to reach our objectives, we looked at many different features of roosts and roost movements, and myotis-like movement patterns. So we wanted to know, does the distance traveled between their successive roosts after the eviction change after they're disturbed? We looked at the area of the roost networks, roost switching, and alternatively roost fidelity, which is them staying at their roosts for successive days in a row. We looked at for the roost boxes, we looked at the rate of occupancy or uptake. We analyzed different box dimensions that we placed, and different colors of the boxes, as well as the frequency of uptake. To characterize the different features of the roosts, we looked at roost types and materials, the heights of which the roosts were located, and their directional or cardinal aspect. So this is our study site. We ran the studies for 2 seasons, in August of 2021, and then again in May or the spring of 2022. In a rural southern Ontario property with plenty of forest cover here. You can see there's like a little river here, and there's quite a lot of lakes and wetlands nearby. This is just the study property here. You can see where some of the boxes are in yellow, and the buildings are, some of them you can't really see here. So unfortunately, the roost eviction became a roost attempted eviction, or more of a roost disturbance, when we realized that there were some entrance ways into the old cabins that we weren't able to find. So this is just a small video of what happened after the eviction. Let me see if it plays. Here we go. So you can see there's some mesh right here. This is a bat box that was actually already located on the property. And you can see that they are not going into the box, but they are attempting to find a way in. And there it goes, back into the roost. It's kind of like, what? So there we go. So what did they do? So in the first year of tracking, we were able to track 6 tags after misnetting. I know this figure is pretty busy, so I'm going to go through it really quick. So here are the tags that we were able to follow, individual bats. This is their movement patterns here and their corresponding colors, just kind of where they went. And this is a farther range map here. You can see that one bat, it was a sub-adult female, went quite far before the disturbance actually, after tagging, and didn't return back while we were tracking. This here is the actual roost property, which I've blown up here in the map to the right. And so numbers next to each roost indicate how many days each bat was, or how many days each roost was used for, and this is the frequency of roost use. So we can kind of see these are larger, small dots and like a big dot. There was a lot of reuse frequency over here going on the property. We were able to track 3 adult males, 1 sub-adult female, and 2 adult females. 2 of the 3 male bats left immediately after the eviction, and we didn't hear from them again. Because of the timing of the season in August, we think they may have left for swarming sites. The females stayed, and roost switching increased after the disturbance. And I'm kind of forgetting some things here that I was going to say. I might just switch off my presenter view. There was some stuff I wanted to report. There we go. Okay, so I just really wanted to say some of these things. I don't want to forget them. So yeah, the females, one of the things they did is they regained entry into the old roost sites, and they kind of were flapping around and staying within quite a small path lengths there. So compared to the 4 days of pre-disturbance tracking, the roost switches increased. So the next year, we were able to track 9 bats, and they were all adult females. Judging by the time of year, it was a different season. So 5 of the tag bats actually dispersed immediately after tagging, and they stayed within about 7.3 kilometers of the roost. You can see like this range here. A lot of them were still using the previously evicted roost a year later. On average, bats exhibited less roost switching than the first year, and many stayed at their respective roost sites for the majority of tracking, and others actually stayed at their roost sites the entire duration and didn't move. So this light blue bat 114 and some of the other ones, 101 also stayed here the entire duration of tracking. There was a stronger roost fidelity when compared to the first year, and after the roost disturbance, the females actually had a lower reuse frequency than the previous year. And for bats that did switch roosts, their path lengths became larger than the first year, although there was a lot of variation in their path lengths. So we weren't really sure if they were going farther or if they were switching. With each switch, we're going farther. But over the 2 years, we were able to uncover 8 well-established roost sites, and 5 of which were large and frequently used, which was really exciting. So in terms of their network size, we measured that with maximum convex polygons, and the average roost network was in August, the first year after the roost disturbance, was just over 100,000 kilometers, which was like about 2.7 times smaller than in the second year. But because over the 2 years, we were able to uncover we actually expected sites, and 5 of which were large. Size of roost networks to probably be larger due to bats actually naturally going farther due to swarming season. We kind of expected that this area would be quite a lot bigger, so it was hard to tell if this difference in area was actually from the disturbance or for another effect of, season. So when we looked at roost types, we realized that the buildings and like anthropogenic structures actually were a really large part of their networks, which isn't really a big surprise. Buildings are in blue here, trees in green, and bat boxes in gold. So directly after, or before the roost disturbance, actually, we see that there is a little bit of bat box use here on the property. And then directly after disturbance, there were no bats found in boxes. None of our tagged bats used boxes. But we did see an increase in tree use. So they weren't really using a lot of trees. And then here they kind of, right after the disturbance, they started using a lot of the trees right on the property's perimeter. And what's interesting is that in the second year, we have no trees used. Maybe they're choosing buildings for their space, their thermal stability, their permanence, and using trees maybe secondarily. So teasing apart these physical roost features were really difficult, especially for little brown myotis, which are a bit of roost generalists. But what we did find were like some common roost type selections were southern and southeastern facing roosts. Roosts that are about 3 to 5 meters off the ground. We had a lot of roosts that were wood siding and tin roofing, especially when they were in attics or sheds. And the most frequently used boxes were often the largest boxes that we had that were painted dark. So this, it's hard to know if this is definitely the attractive features of a roost. However, there's some other work that's been done that says, they do like southern-facing roosts due to a solar, an increased solar warming period for those boxes, or the darker ones obviously have a larger heat capacity. But again, a lot of the roosts were on these buildings, and they all had the same features, so it's a little hard to tease that one apart. But for our box uptake, we had some pretty exciting results. So we had relatively fast uptake of these boxes that we put up for mitigation purposes. I don't think I mentioned it earlier, but we had placed 4 different styles of box with different colors on 4 different buildings on this property as a mitigation tool. So I think I missed that when I was describing it, but we had done that right before eviction. We wanted to see, are they using these boxes? So right away here in the first year, you can see that we had I'm going to describe the figure. So we have date on the x-axis here and box frequency. On the y, each box is represented by a different color here, and then these numbers, I'm sorry if they're hard to see, that's just how many bats were in each box over time. So you see that we had some use, the attempted eviction happened, and then there was a time frame when none of the bats were using the boxes. they seem to kind of use a more distributed range of the boxes here, which was interesting. You know, maybe they were like exploring, but consistently they're using this gold box. It's box C, and it is our largest, darkest box that we had placed. And then the second year, all four of the boxes that we had mounted were used, which was also exciting. And then in the second year here, they kind of seem to have settled on this box C, this gold one here, which, you know, kind of is consistent with the previous year. And although they didn't really use the other boxes very much, the boxes here in green and teal, those were the boxes that we placed, so they are still using them, maybe just less so. So, you know, despite our small sample size and steady seasonal differences, we were able to come to the conclusions that the little brown myotis colonies are relatively resistant to this roost disturbance. And despite the attempted eviction, they were still willing to return to the roost, and they used the boxes that we had mounted quite frequently. The rate of our box uptake was relatively fast compared to some other studies, about 7 days after the attempted eviction, sorry. And occupancy consistently increased over time for those boxes. So it was good to see those results. You know, if a roost eviction or a roost disturbance is deemed necessary, we suggest having plenty of boxes to put up and not just one style. Likely doesn't encapsulate the entire microclimate that's going on in there. So, you know, but larger, darker boxes seem to be something that they like, likely for that solar heat capacity, or even being able to move between chambers, having that space. So we do suggest that if you're going to do that, to place plenty of different styles of boxes, and hopefully the bats have other things like large, ample forest cover, and placing boxes on buildings, we think would likely be a way to attract bats to those boxes. Yeah, so if members of the public are looking to evict bats from their homes, we suggest that they do that a little bit later in the season, just because partial fission of the colony is already occurring due to swarming. So probably have a lessened impact on the roosting behavior of those bats if you're doing it a little bit later in the season. So yeah, I'd just like to thank everybody for their time, thank ECCC for funding this work, and Dr. Karen Vanderwolf has been helping on earlier versions of this manuscript, so I want to thank her. And just appreciate that our work was done on this unceded traditional territory of the Mississauga and Anishinaabe First People. And it wouldn't have been possible to do this field work without their continued stewardship of this land. So I just wanted to acknowledge that as well. Thank you.
That was great, Sarah. Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions? Yes, at the top.
So when you guys were setting up these different sort of bat boxes, were you looking at, I saw one that was isolated on a post and then others that were on a building. Did you notice a preference between either of those setups?
So the question was different bat boxes, any preference?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So the photo of that box on a pole was one of the existing boxes that the homeowner had mounted. And they were using that box, one bat was using that box before the eviction, but we didn't mount any boxes to any poles. As a comparison, we mounted all our mitigation boxes on buildings. And that kind of being a factor of the study itself, you know, we obviously had a much larger frequency of bats in boxes that were mounted to buildings because we only had the one on the pole to compare to. I have read some papers though that did do comparisons to poles and boxes on buildings, and I know it's just one of those things that's hard to tease apart. There's a lot of theories about thermal stability on poles versus on buildings, and I think there's a lot of questions to do with how that thermal stability relates to their, you know, whether they actually are preferring that box to another box. So yeah, we don't know if this one, if we had had more boxes to mount on poles, that would have been great. And then we could have really done that comparison, but that's a great question. Go ahead.
So you were talking about like roost type selection.
Oh, yeah.
Like the weather or climate changes would have an impact on that. So like if it's warmer out, they might select trees or poles, or if it's colder out, they might prefer buildings.
Great question. Yeah. So the question was whether or not the ambient temperature would affect maybe their roost selection choice versus like something that's maybe on a tree versus on a building, right? Is that right? Absolutely. Actually, there was a part of this project that we were wanting to take temperature. We did actually take temperature data inside the boxes, so we could kind of see how that was changing with the ambient temperature or what we were mounting the boxes on, buildings versus poles and things like that. And I absolutely think that there's probably a difference in choice based on the ambient temperature of the day and wanting to choose a cooler roost when it's a really hot day versus wanting to choose maybe a box in the sun on a cooler spring morning. And we did, I recognize that we did our studies on 2 different seasons, and so that box use could have absolutely changed based on season. But yes, so we had those temperature loggers in those boxes, and we wanted to look at that actually for this project. But the problem was we weren't also taking the counts of each box when it was at those temperatures, so it was really hard for us to relate what the temperature was in that box and how many bats were in each box and in each chamber. So that would be a great follow-up for this project.
If I was reading the numbers correctly, the maximum you had in that box C was 10. How did that compare with the maximum that were in that cabin?
Oh, in the initial roost. So that's a great question. We did do emergence counts at the very beginning. It's just that the emergence counts were kind of varied, but we counted approximately, I think it was 18 bats that came out of the original roost before the disturbance. So, if we estimate that colony at around 20 bats or so, 10 bats in that box was actually a pretty good number to see, especially when you see the first year of data. It's really just like 1 or 2 bats that were using the boxes at first. So to see kind of consistently 10 or 6 or around that area in that specific box kind of made us think like there's something going on with this one specifically.
Time for one more question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you know, for the bats that sort of left the building area and parked themselves at other locations, I think some of them were buildings, maybe some of them were bat houses. Do you know if any of those locations had pre-existing colonies of, little grounds or big grounds or whatever?
Yeah, we don't know necessarily, especially, there was actually, oh, my slides are gone. So the second year no, it's all good, don't worry about it. Within the second year, they did that a little bit more, right? They kind of just left the roost and parked themselves in these various locations. And when we were to track them to those locations, we found a really old box that had quite a lot of bats in there. And so it would have been really difficult to tell if those were all the same bats from our colony or a new colony. So it is possible that they had other colonies for sure, especially because, I don't remember what I was going to say, but yeah, I think that that place was a little bit farther away, so it's very possible that some of the bats in that box were from another colony. It's very possible. We also did catch some big brown bats in the first year, so we do know there's lots of bats in the area, so yeah, very possible. Thank you.
That was great. Thanks, Sarah.